This is Phil Parsons, voice of Nappa from Dragon Ball Z, and you're watching Spoiler Force.
All right, so this is episode 170 of Spoiler Force Podcast. My name is Ricky, and thank you for tuning in. My guest this week, someone I'm very excited to have. If you've watched shows like Attack on Titan, My Hero Academia, and especially Dragon Ball Z, you'll know his voice, the voice of Nappa, Phil Parsons. Let me bring my guest on the show. Thank you so much for doing this today.
Thanks, Ricky. It's good to be here.
Yeah, so man, I was honestly like I tell a lot of my guests here, especially voice actors, I'm usually like not expecting quick responses. I was very very appreciative of how quickly you responded because I know with con season coming up and everyone's doing cons and their their circuits and stuff, whether it's local or traveling. Times like this, it's you guys do get very busy. So thank you for your time, man. And I want to say I've had Dragon Ball voice actors on, but to have Nappa on the show was really cool because you've been on the show like in the early days of Dragon Ball Z, and I was looking through your credits and man, like I was really impressed to see like I didn't realize you had like 20 plus years of voiceover credits.
Yeah, I'm an old timer.
So for fans and followers who don't know, how did you get started in just voice acting in general? I'm sure you have tons of experience in this field.
Well, I was an actor mostly doing stage acting in the Dallas, Texas area through the 90s into the 2000s, just anything to make a living in small-time showbiz. I started out doing community theater. Then I got into comedy troupes, doing sketch, improv. Was doing that for years. Did a little stand-up. I taught comedy traffic school. And then I was doing celebrity impersonations, which now people would think you're a cosplayer because it involved actually dressing up like, somebody, usually Austin Powers. That movie was really big, in the late 90s, early 2000s.
I saw a video of that, of you doing Dr. Evil.
And I did lots of gigs as Austin Powers and Dr. Evil and sometimes other characters, politicians. I have a closet full of wigs and stuff. And I was making good money doing that. That was most of my income was doing corporate gigs, private parties, just doing characters and writing comedy. And Funimation was a very small studio at the time. They kind of just started up in the very late 90s. Dragon Ball was on TV. Millennials were kids watching it and everything. And I'd heard of it, but I'd never seen it. Somebody I knew from doing murder mystery dinner shows was like, hey, my neighbor works at this studio and they have auditions doing this anime stuff, So I went in and read for something. It was a direct-to-video anime movie, but part of a series called Lupin the Third. If any of the fans remember Lupin the Third, I've heard it pronounced Lupin, but I think it's Lupin anyway. So I played an old retired British spy, and they liked me and kept using me. And I got the Dragon Ball job probably within the first year. I don't remember exactly when it was, but I've had fans, oh, how'd you get cast as Nappa? And they're imagining like tons of callbacks and competing with all these actors. And it was nothing like that. Again, I can't stress how small of an operation Funimation was back then. It was basically, the ocean dub was what most millennials saw in the 90s on TV, right? And so when Funimation got the license, they went back and redid the first season with the Saiyan saga. But in that, it was, I think, Schimmel and Chris Sabat were doing most of the voices. Like they were just getting it done as quickly as they can. So Chris Sabat actually was the second Nappa. I think I could be wrong, but because I wasn't doing it then. But my understanding is when it went on Toonami, and Funimation was doing the dub, it was Chris Sabat. So now he was like the second Nappa, Michael Dobson, then Chris Sabat. And then in the early 2000s, it was like, okay, we're going to be on Cartoon Network. We're going to start doing DVDs. So let's go ahead and get a fuller cast. And he basically, I was in the studio doing something and Sabat's like, hey, Phil, can you sound like this guy? And they played a little bit of Michael Dobson, the OG Ocean Dub Nappa. And I just did an impression of it. And they said, no, good enough. Get in the booth. Getting cast as Nappa was that simple. I had no idea at that moment that I was getting involved in something. I didn't know then how big Dragon Ball was, nor that it would be something that would be this worldwide phenomenon that people would still be excited about 2 decades later, you know. So it was very lucky that I was in the studio that day and I did a passable impression of Michael Dobson, you know. And even though my character's only in part of the first season, I still get a lot of appreciation for that role, you know.
Yeah, I was like looking through clips. Like I'm sure you've seen what I posted on my Instagram. Like I like to do little teaser trailers of who I have on the show, and it was hard to kind of distinguish at first between you and Michael Dobson's Nappa because I was like, man, I have to. I didn't want to put the wrong clip on or like with the wrong voice, so I had to like go back and replay like certain scenes or like find it on YouTube and
Oh yeah,
compare it
I'm
against.
never sure when I look at a clip either. In fact,
Yeah.
when Team Four Star did the DBZ abridged, I always thought that guy Takahata 101 was doing a really good impression of me. I'd listen and go, "Oh, he sounds just like me." And then I heard in some interview he said, "Oh, I was doing an impression of Michael Dobson." So, you know, I haven't heard Sabbath's Nappa very much. I don't know that. I guess to see that you probably have to find someone who recorded it when it was on TV and has transferred like a VHS tape, you know, to a digital format. So they're probably hard to come by.
You brought up Team Four Star, man. Like, did you feel any type of way of how they were doing like the abridged series? I spoke with some like people who maybe like were somewhat, I guess, offended by the work, or like it seemed like it was mocking your guys' work. Did you ever feel like that?
Well, I was unaware of it. I
Okay.
was, again, even in the 2000s, by the time we finished redoing season 1, and then I was doing the video games, and even by the time I got to do Kai, which is now that's like 2008, I think. I really still was unaware of how big Dragon Ball was, and I was unaware of DBZ abridged, so I didn't know about it when it was happening. I personally, I love DBZ abridged. I haven't seen much of it, but I love that they took Nappa and gave him a much bigger role than he got, you know, in the official story, and the Ghost Nappa and all the funny lines.
Yeah.
But I know what you're talking about. A lot of
Yeah.
fans come up to me at tables at cons, and they're little trepidations even bringing up DBZ abridged because I think some voice actors aren't happy with it. But I'm always like, yeah, I'll put hey Vegeta, it's a Chaozu on your pop
Oh my
figure. I don't mind, you know. Um, but and I've also heard that maybe and forgive me, what is the name of the company that owns Dragon Ball?
I think it was Toei.
Yeah, Toy. I understand it was at the time Toy was not happy with the fact that
Yeah.
DBZ abridged. So that might have been something the real big guys were like trying to, you know, do what the company wanted. I'm not sure. That's me speculating.
Yeah.
I've heard things.
But no, that's cool that you're able to find comedy in that because again, I honestly think that because of a bridge like Nappa just exploded in popularity.
I
He
agree.
was always just a character in season one that took out the Z Warriors until Goku came in, and then once it got on YouTube and then he blew up and everyone's like that's a Chaozu, and he has like the Pokeball in his hand. He throws
Mhm.
it. It's freaking hilarious. Like you said, the Ghost Nappa, and then he has his own radio station and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
even like the small clips, he's like, "Hey Vegeta, hey Vegeta," So all little things like that, and made that character really like just blow up more. But seeing that like Dragon Ball Z, even Dragon Ball like up to Dragon Ball Super now, like just that franchise itself has become even bigger than what it was before. Like so many video games that come out almost every other year or so. When you go back in the booth and just record for Nappa, what goes through your mind for that?
Well, funny you asked that. That happened just today. I did some recording for an upcoming video game as Nappa, and what was nice was I didn't have to recreate his death scene because I must have, but besides the Z dub and the Kai dub and several of the games, I've died as Nappa many times, and I always hope it'll turn out differently. That maybe Vegeta will, you know, think, they can do great things with spinal surgery, and he'll just give him a second chance, but it never happens. But this one is a fighting game, so it was. I guess I technically died because I made some sounds that for when you lose, but it was a few lines, a lot of grunts and screams. But but that's what's great about any Dragon Ball actor will tell you. I'm sure some of your guests may have. We love Dragon Ball because it it keeps on giving. You keep getting work out of it.
I know with some of the games they do like a lot of what if storylines and stuff like that. I'm pretty sure you've seen like Nappa become a Super Saiyan and stuff like that, and
Mhm.
having the beard. What was your thoughts saying that? Like them adding more, I guess, content to this character.
Yeah, I would love it. I wish that Bandai or Funko would have made a figure of Great Ape Nappa. I think that'd be really cool. I like all the different permutations from the games and stuff. My favorite game to voice was Kakarot because there was a whole storyline, and I got to you know do other things with him.
Did you voice the Great Ape version of Nappa as well?
Yeah, yeah.
How do you just make like animalistic noises that they give you, or
It's been some years ago. Yeah, I think
yeah?
so. Yeah.
Yeah, I spoke with Rob McCollum, who's done like voices like that too. Where he was in the another Dragon Ball Z movie where he played a big monster, and I was just asking him like how did you come up with it? He's like you just do it, like you just snarl and make all these
Yeah.
grunting noises. Yeah,
Same thing you do when you're a kid and you're playing Monster. You know what I mean?
yeah.
It's no different, really.
Now when you go to cons and signing the Dragon Ball Funkos, man, like how is that like for you? Seeing how big the convention scene has getting.
Well, I didn't do conventions for most of my career. I did just a couple. The first one was in 2016, very small con. That was pre-pop. And I did one Dragon Ball only con its first year in 2018. And there wasn't a Nappa pop yet. That was during a time, though, that I was really working a lot at Funimation. That's when I was doing Attack on Titan and other shows. Seemed like I was in there a lot. But I didn't really start doing them until last December. So it's been about 7 months, 8 months now. So yeah, it's an eye opener. I didn't know how big the pop thing was. Unfortunately, both my pops, I have a Kenny pop and a Nappa pop. They both got vaulted a few months ago. So
Oh
they're
wow.
they're hard to get, especially the Nappa pop. Like I have a stash of some, and but I'm always on the lookout for more. But now I have to buy them off eBay or Amazon one at a time because I sign them, but I also draw on them. I do remarks on them. So like I've got a convention this weekend. So usually my prep for a convention is making sure I have everything and then doing up some pops to have on hand because did one last weekend and I had six remark pops and I sold 4 of them. So I got to do new ones. I got an example here. This is a Nappa that I did. And that's I call it line art because I don't color it in so you can still see the figure. And if someone buys it, I quote it on the side and sign it and everything. And then I also do where I do full color, like this one.
Oh wow.
So you got Kenny on the front. I also put like the gun, coming off the side.
Have you done art before you were doing voice acting, or is this something that you did like just?
No, I'm not trained. They're amateurish. I can draw, but and learning how to draw with paint pens on plastic is challenging. But
Yeah,
yeah, I have
that's really impressive, man. Sorry to cut you off. I was just really like impressed by because I
oh,
I
thanks.
cannot I cannot draw to save my life, man. I can't even
Yeah,
draw stick figures.
originally I was just signing them, and then I think I did a doodle of a visor on one, or Nappa's face, just a little doodle, and people started freaking out over it. So one guy said, "If I pay you extra, could you draw like his whole face on the cover?" So that's kind of how it started. And but I enjoy doing it. It's fun, especially when someone buys it that's not necessarily one of the professional collectors that's going to have it on eBay within an hour. Where it's really for someone's personal collection and they really
Right.
appreciate it. That I like to. Feel like I'm running a pet adoption when one of my art pops finds a good home.
Well, I mean, now that you showed the Kenny pop, and Attack on Titan is one of my favorite animes of all time, and I read the manga before watching the show, so seeing Kenny's adaptation in the anime was very very cool, and especially how he came on the scene. How were you able to get that role for Kenny Ackerman in Attack on Titan?
That is courtesy of Mike McFarland. Have you had him on the show?
Not yet, but a lot of the guests I speak with, they always bring him up.
Well,
I've probably seen him at a con or two, but I've never spoke with him yet.
yeah. He's one of the greats at Funimation. He's been there since the early days. He was already there when I came on board. And I came on board, Funimation had been around for a few years. I did my first anime in 2002. And he was already there. but he's the director they give really the big stuff to. Like when they got Chainsaw Man last year, they signed it to Mike. Attack on Titan, Mike. If it's something big they think's going to be big in the States, because he's fantastic. He really grasps the story. I find him very easy to work with. He can direct well. It doesn't have to tell you very much to get what he wants out of you. And so I've been fortunate that he's used me over the years. And he had that role in mind for me and brought me in on it. Again, another example where I didn't know how big it was until after I'd already done season 3 and it was over. I looked at online and found a video. I guess it was some con where they were showing a preview of season 3. So it was just, you see that moment where they're on the roof and Kenny lands, and looks up, long time, Levi. And, Mercer's like, Kenny, and the crowd just went nuts because they knew the manga. They knew who Kenny was. They knew what was about to happen. And that was cool. It was cool to be a part of a moment like that,
Yeah, that just introduction scene of Kenny fighting and chasing Levi, man, with studios, like, they did that over the top, like, compared to the manga version. It was insane. And your work as Kenny was phenomenal. I loved hearing, like, I guess just because in the Japanese he has more, he does speak a little bit of English lines too in the Japanese dub, where he'll say a few things, but it sounded, the way how you spoke, he sounded more like an English speaking person, especially even with his name Kenny. So like it looked like it matched his character very well. And again, you did great.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it was a lot of fun to do. People ask me what's your favorite role. I always say that when it comes to roles that they might have heard of, that was a substantial role, because he had a real arc, And when he first comes in, if you were just watching the anime, you thought, well, this guy's just chaotic evil. He's just a madman. But there's reasons he does what he does, and I got to play a lot of different levels. A lot of my characters die, so I always gauge them on how good their death scene is. I thought his was pretty poignant, Nappa died like a punk, so it's not high ranking. But my favorite death was probably a character called Buccaneer in Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. Going back a ways, but he went out like a boss, man. He was a real hero.
You're getting all these like characters that, because again, you have a lot of experience in just like working in different animes that may have short or long arcs or roles. When you find jobs like this, does it ever, like, I guess, affect you or make you think like you want to get roles that are longer, in certain series?
Oh yeah, especially now that I'm doing conventions, and so my livelihood is sort of based on being a part of more popular shows. Yeah, because before it was really just back when I started working with doing anime, it was just a little extra money. I mean, I was making most of my money doing the live work, and it was just cool to be in a cartoon. It was just a cool kind of side job to do. But now that I see how much it really means, because at the time, now I'm aware how much it means to people and how much what an important cultural contribution is to people's entertainment. Like at the time, I thought, oh yeah, it's just an afternoon cartoon on TV for kids. But when there's anime that people are so passionate about that they sit and discuss it and have podcasts and blogs about, and they cosplay it, and they spend a lot of money on collectibles, and they've read the manga and watched the anime multiple times, yeah, it's nice to be a part of something like that gives you a legacy, to be a part of something that's going to mean something to somebody for a while. So yeah, I'd love to have bigger roles. I'm always excited when I get cast in a show. The last one that was sort of substantial that I just finished was for a show called Hell's Paradise. Yeah, which is part of the Dark Trio.
Yeah.
To Jujutsu Kaisen and Chainsaw Man. And I played Gentetsu Sai, who's sort of a big, sort of funny, grumpy samurai type dude on this mythical quest.
He's got a bit of Nappa in him too, but I like that he wasn't like right away a villainous type of character. He just kind of did things on his own too, and I was really impressed with this character because him getting his arm cut off in the beginning right away, and then coming
let's be fair, cutting his own hand off. I mean, making that choice,
Yeah, and then coming back at the end to to help the protagonist was really cool to see that. But yeah, Hell's Paradise was crazy. I'm gonna be honest, it took me a while to kind of even get into the show because I know that they were doing a lot of lore building
Hmm.
and just like introducing all the different characters, and so it was kind of, unless you read the manga, it was hard to gauge like, all right, which one is gonna go first, you know? So we were kind of
Oh
guessing
yeah.
it. Yeah.
Well, me too, because the studio told me I was cast, and like, okay, so this is a major character. He appears in a lot of the promo art and so forth. Um, so I announced on my social media and got some prints made just in case. And then I was like in the first couple episodes, and then weeks went by, and he didn't show up again. I was like, "Hey, was I recast, or were we wrong about him being a major character?" And they said, "No, no, it's just they're, like you said, they're doing lore build. This is the first season, and they're not gonna cut back and forth quickly between storylines. They're gonna show a lot of one storyline and then go to the next one." So, but yeah, I had a cool. I think episode 11 was really cool, and I think it's been announced for season 2. So
Yeah.
hopefully, Tetsu Sai will have people that know the manga say, "Oh yeah, he's got some more stuff to do." So
Yeah, that show was really I guess for me, just as a viewer, like it really caught me off guard because like I said before, I wasn't expecting much from it as well, and then just just a lot of story, a lot of world building in the show. So I wasn't really like giving it my full attention up until like the second half of the season, and then that's where it really caught my eye. So I went back and rewatched it again just to pick up the stuff that I missed out on. But I'm very excited for season 2 because I honestly I don't know where they're going to be heading with this direction, especially how they ended the season. So it's going to be it seems to me like it's going to be very crazy.
well, I'm very excited for season 3 of Fire Force if it ever happens. That's been delayed a long time.
Yeah, I tried watching that one. I wasn't that into it because I think during that time when the first season Fire Force dropped, I think it was around like when Demon Slayer and a lot of other big animes were dropping around that 2019, 2020 around there.
Yeah,
I tried watching it, but I know the premise though, but that's on my list to watch for sure.
right.
Um, but I wanted to touch up more on your comedy career, like that you were doing. Were you just doing like stand up in local areas as well, like just going to I guess.
Oh, stand up. I didn't do very long. I did work a lot with the comedy troops,
Okay.
and I still miss doing that. It's great to be part of a group doing shows, and there's and that hasn't died. Improv troops, I see them all the time, but it's kind of a young man's game unless somebody's got a lot of money and there's like a theater where there's a payroll and it's like a business where you can make it your job. And that's the problem. It's like having a band, in your 20s, nobody's got any demands. They can spend all their time rehearsing and taking gigs for little money. But, we never could get a cohesive troupe going because people were getting older and getting married and having kids and getting their real jobs going. And so I tried stand up and I liked it okay, but I feel like to be a good stand up, you have to have a point of view. I feel like the best stand ups have a very consistent, strong point of view that they express confidently. And I didn't quite find my stand up persona. So I just dabbled in it really, but I did use a lot of comedy chops in my other stuff, like doing the corporate gigs. If I showed up as Austin Powers at a company, I didn't just show up in costume and take pictures. I was performing, and I was doing comedy based on their corporate culture and their people. They provide me information ahead of time and I turn it into entertainment.
Do you have any like rememberable moments doing like the Austin Power stuff at all? Like I said,
Oh,
I really like the Doctor Evil video that you did.
which one did you see?
It was on YouTube. I think you were talking about.
Oh, that was that corporate thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. God, that was a long time ago. Yeah, that was something that was for a trade show, and it was playing in their booth. People could come in there and watch the little projector thing they had. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, most of the memories, people that do a lot of entertainment or any kind of one job, again, whether it's comedy, acting, a band, they kind of run together. The things you remember are usually the worst situations when something really bad happened. That's what sticks out. Um, but I certainly, I mean, I made a lot of money off that Mike Myers character. I mean, at one time I was doing it all the time, and I had clients fly me out of the country for it.
Oh wow.
I did like 3 gigs in Europe, and Went to Bahamas once, and yeah, if you spin it right, you can. I know a guy personally that used to do Austin Powers. He does Donald Trump, and he's done really well with it. You know, like he used to be a stand-up, but he kind of started doing the impersonator stuff, doing corporate work, and you know, Howard Stern uses him. He's doing really well with it. I never quite got that big league with it, but
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, have you done any cameo stuff? Like people would.
I haven't. I have had people reach out to me through an agent where I've done individual, not Cameo, the actual website, but I've made videos like that for people that paid me on an individual basis. I did do one as Dr. Evil for a guy's birthday during COVID. Done a couple Austin Powers like that. I did do an anime one during COVID as well, and it was for a show that I had a really large role in. That again, Mike McFarlane cast me, but I found a lot of fans haven't even heard of it, let alone seen it. It's called Blood Blockade Battlefront.
I've not heard that one either.
Yeah, it was my understanding. It was really a really big anime and a really big manga in Japan, but it's one of those ones that just for whatever reason didn't find a big audience here. We did 2 seasons of it, and it also I think it was one of the shows that didn't go on TV but streamed only, which is
Okay.
common now. But I think this was again 2017, 18ish when that I don't think that was still yet the business model for anime. I don't know. That's over my head. I'm not sure. But I still have people at cons that will, you know, be into that show and they're way into it. They're very excited, you know. But I had a guy reach out to me a couple of years ago through social media. It was his boyfriend's birthday, and they were both huge fans of this show, Blood Blockade Battlefront. My character was Klaus, and he wanted a greeting, a birthday greeting to his boyfriend from Klaus, you know. So I wrote a whole thing, put some music behind it, and it was just voice, you know. But so that was like a cameo thing too, you know.
Yeah, I know that, or I've been seeing like a lot of voice actors do that too, like where they do like signings on Streamily, and then they do cameo videos and stuff like that. Even at conventions, they offer those services, like where you
Yeah,
can
I
get
do it.
freaking
Yeah,
shout outs and
sometimes I'll
stuff
take
like that.
someone's phone at a con. They'll pay me, and I'll get on there and do a greeting to somebody. Again, coming from comedy like I do, and doing a lot of um, customized humor, you know, I'll take. They'll give me. All right, so yeah, this is for Bob's birthday. Or tell me 3 things about Bob, what he does for a living, or what you guys tease him about, a nickname he has. And so I'll, as Nappa or whoever, incorporate that into that. You know.
Have you voicing characters this long in the acting industry? Have you considered like going into like writing or ADR at all, like in like for anime or anything like that?
I have considered talking to the studio about writing. I've talked to a couple of other actors who also write. I do write, and it'd be an interesting challenge, but it looks really technical. To me, it's really a pretty magic trick that we take uh, a piece of entertainment that's made in Japan, which is, you know, a completely different culture from the West. I mean, almost everything is that how these cultures have evolved is so different, and their approach to entertainment is very different. You know, the way they have characters act, the things they had them say, are just different to every impulse you'd have to write something in the West, I think. And then you take a language that doesn't really literally translate. You have to do a little translation, then you have to massage it and make it make sense. And then finally, you have to make it fit the mouth flaps. That's very big at Crunchyroll, as it's, you know, as it was with Funimation, was we want the English lines to fit exactly those flaps, you know. So to write that looks extremely technical. Like the creative part seems very small, and the technical part looks like a lot of overhead. So I don't know if I would have the knack for it, but it's something I have considered trying. As far as ADR, I don't know. I have done directing in live theater, but I don't know if I would have the chops to, again, a lot of technical aspects to that. I'm just too lazy, Ricky, to do all of them. That's what it boils down to.
I speak with actors who work in that stuff too. Like you're just hearing how much work they put in just to like even like the late hours, just doing ADR, assistant ADR, really in
Mhm.
that, and like just going into directing and all that. How much work you have to really put in.
Well, because it's a machine now. Again, I go back
Yeah.
to when I was doing those early days of Funimation. It was a small operation, and all these properties were old. You know,
Mhm.
that loop in the third video, the first thing I did, that had been produced like years before, you know. So and same thing with the shows. We were always several years behind on the shows. I think Dragon Ball, the first season was made in the late '80s in Japan.
Yeah.
So if you got cast, the director had already watched everything and they knew, like, oh, here's who you're going to be, and here's what's going to happen to your character. And, so say, for example, he acts like a good guy, but then he turns out he's actually a bad guy with an agenda. Well, that's something to know. You can play that, you can play hints of it in your early performance. Now we're just a week or two behind the Japanese in finishing these episodes. So we don't know that. Just like I get cast as Contensusai, I don't know what episodes he's going to be in, or if he's going to be gone for half the big bulk of season one. We know as we go along. But also, we've got to get them done. It just the machine
Yeah.
is constantly going. So I'm sure the people you've talked to that are directors are feeling that. They're trying to get it done.
Yeah, especially like with certain seasons, like this summer, with like having tons of big animes coming out, like Bleach or Jujutsu Kaisen and stuff like that, coming out, and it's just a lot of big shows coming out. And then again, with simuldub, it's a lot of work just going in and out like that, just to try to maintain this consistent release, because you don't really have time to think about the character now, because you have to put in the work. You're just doing what you're told, and then just reading the lines and putting in your performance for that character.
Yeah, even sometimes the acting part gets more technical. I've had times where there's a word that's difficult to pronounce. That show Blood Blockade Battlefront, the character, when it was one of those shows where when they fight, they call out their moves,
Mhm.
and he was German, so his moves were called out in German, and sometimes they were made up terms in made up German. And we had a guy on staff who spoke German. He would come in and advise us, how do I say this? But when you're trying to scream out a line, which is hard to voice act where you're screaming, and you're trying to act and convey something and time it to the flaps, and you're speaking a language you don't speak, and you're so worried about pronunciation, it gets where you're not really acting. You're just trying to get through it.
Well, how is that like? I know with Dragon Ball, that's a big thing with you screaming and calling out moves, but and especially in the video games. So like, what was going through that experience? Did you find that like weird at all, or you were just going with what they
Just
told you?
exhausting. I mean,
Yeah.
if I had a session that was going to involve it, the only time it was really bad was in the original Z, because that was longer. Those power ups, some of them went on and on, and you'd have that nightmare situation where I'd be in the booth and we'd save those to the end because it's going to shred your throat, and I do one of those long, it goes on and on and on. You finish, and you're sweating, and you're like, oh. And then you hear Sabbath lean into the mic and go, "I'm so sorry, dude. We need to get one more," and just like, okay, give me a second, So that's what I was really pleased about with when they did the Kai dub, that a lot of that stuff was condensed and it wasn't nearly so demanding. But I don't see I feel like maybe anime's changed. I don't watch it so much, so you would know better, but it feels like we don't get as much of the big long screaming and voice shredding power up kind of things that there used to be.
It's changing for sure. I think it's still some of that in like in the shonen tropes, like a lot of the adventure
Yeah,
type
yeah.
anime, the action ones. There's still a little bit of that, but there's a lot of different genres now in the anime too. You got like slice of life stuff, you got romance
Mhm.
stuff, dark comedy stuff. So like there's a lot of different avenues you can go that you don't even have to really do that.
Yeah, I remember getting cast, and I was recast. I was only on the show for a few weeks, but show called Detective Conan: Case Closed. Remember that one, old school one?
Yeah.
And I was originally was playing the inspector, the one who um, was in pretty much every episode. He's the cop trying to investigate and doesn't know how to solve the case, and the guy that he thinks is a little kid's actually going to solve it. But it was so nice that, oh, this is just acting. This guy just talks, just be a cop. You know what I mean? Because a lot of the shows then I remember, and they were mostly shown in shows back then, it seemed like, and there was always some yelling and screaming, and you know.
Yeah, shows like that are very. It took me a while to kind of like to adapt to different genres in anime, because I grew up with a lot of the Dragon Ball Z action stuff, Naruto stuff like that. So I was so used to watching a lot of these animes or shonen stuff. Then once I kind of like dove deeper into these different genres, I'm like, man, it's a very different feel. Like there's certain animes out there that seem even that are even more like just dramas, really, where
Hmm.
you're just watching it and you're just like invested in it emotionally, like what's gonna happen next, So there's a lot of good animes out there like that, and I think it's cool that those kind of animes are getting the attention now versus back then, and especially with streaming services and stuff like that. Some of that stuff can drop like all at once, or some are
Hmm.
dropping weekly and stuff like that. So it's great to see like different voice actors voice different genres for those shows.
Yeah, it was. I remember the first time I did one of those. I was like, "Wait, there's no magic powers in this. Nobody flies. Nobody's part animal. It's just people talking and you know having a regular life. What? Yeah, it was very strange."
um so before we do get into some of these fan questions here, man, I did want to touch upon maybe a little bit more of your con experience. Like you said, you've recently been going
Mhm.
um last year, right, that you started going. Were there any cons that you went to recently that that really just caught your attention or kind of like surprised you?
Well, I'm still so new at it that I like when I go to a different part of the country that I haven't been to because I feel like I get more. These are people that never had the chance to see me anywhere. Um, I did one in the Northeast. Yeah, I'm still based in Dallas, Texas, so I did one in a couple that were a signing appearance and a con that were up in like New Jersey and New York, and that was really cool. I'd not met any New York fans. Um, and that store signing in Brooklyn, that was boy, a lot of people came to that. Um, so that was really cool. Uh, done a lot in Texas because a lot of cons are in Texas, and there's so many voice actors here that they book us a lot. But haven't done any in the Northwest yet. Up in like Seattle or Portland, Washington, Oregon. I'd like to do that. I've only done one store signing on the West Coast. So I'd like to go back there and do something.
Yeah, Texas has like a con almost every week, like whether it's a big one or a small one.
Hmm.
It's like I've only been living here in Texas for a little over a year, and I was really surprised with how much work gets put out for just small conventions or store signings and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And then like just seeing how even like with independent cons, like they'll have like sponsors come up and then hire or like they'll just work together and then book like a lot of, like you said, a lot of different voice actors, or try to get people all in the same show at one event.
Yeah,
And
that's
so
what you want. That
yeah.
will draw people. So I've not done one yet with Derek Snow. He played Shinra in Fire Force, and we had this big epic fight in the end of season one. So suppose I've got a Fire Force pop coming out soon, but I haven't seen it officially. I'll believe it when I'm holding it in my hand because you never can see your Funko. But all signs point that I'll have that soon, and once that happens, I hope I'll be doing some Fire Force themed panels. I've done a few Dragon Balls. I did an Etchy con, was my first con I did in December, and so they had people
That's
there.
one in Houston, right?
It was actually just south of Austin, San Marcos,
Okay.
and I had a lot of high school DxD people there, and I was Azazel on that show. So
Well, let's get to some of these fan questions here, Phil. So this first one here is by Pop Greens, and they ask, with how distinctive of character Kenny Ackerman was in terms of presentation and demeanor, was there a lot of room to play around with the line delivery, or were you recording? Wait, was there? Let me reword that. Was there a lot of room to play around with the line delivery when you were recording for him?
well, you know, unlike say doing original animation, say if you're on The Simpsons and you're in a booth recording, where they're going to animate around what you do, you know, in dubbing ADR, we're slaves to the timing. So we are limited to what and we often try to match the general tone of whatever the Japanese actor did too. We always, you probably had people discuss this on the show, but some people are, what's it like in the booth? How's it set up? And go, you got one screen with the animation, another screen with the script, and the first thing you do is you watch the scene with the original Japanese audio, and that so you're getting guided by a lot of things. But I will say the thing that was freeing about Kenny for me was, since Funimation, now Crunchyroll, is based in Texas, there was always an edict to never do Texas twangs or Southern dialects, even if you're doing some crazy character that's only going to have a few lines in an episode of something. They seem to really not want to advertise that we're in Texas. I don't know if they were trying to portray an image that we were in LA or not, or it felt like we weren't good actors if we sounded like we were from Texas. I'm not sure what the philosophy was behind it, but that's why Kenny having that Western style was freeing, because I could feel free to make him a full on cowboy, you know, and that guided the way I delivered lines, in the sense that, you know, he did things like, if he said um, he wouldn't say everyone was a slave to something. He would say everyone was a slave to something. You know, he dropped his G's. It was so,
Yeah.
um, and he was always smiling really big. So it felt free to, no matter what grisly things were going on, or how horribly he was taunting Levi or something. You know, you got to put a smile in it. You know.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say earlier, like the way how he was given like this cowboy esque
Mm-hmm.
essence in the show, which I thought that was great too. But you know, I never knew that though about like I guess like the image of not trying to show like you're from Texas. I never knew that. That's the first time I've heard that. I do know that, you know, because like a lot of actors go from like LA to Texas and stuff like that. So they're like the two big hubs for acting. But
Mm-hmm.
I never knew about that. Um, this next question here is from Julian from What's in My Head podcast.
Mm-hmm.
He asks if Nappa were to get revived throughout any of the DBZ arcs, which arc would it be, and why is it in the Cell Saga? He loves the Cell Saga, so that's why he brings that up.
You know, I don't know enough about Dragon Ball to speculate. Someone, but I've had fans at my table at conventions and signings uh, give me a very convoluted reason why he technically was part of the Frieza Force, and therefore he qualifies for resurrection. Like they have you know, fan theoried a way that he could come back. So it feels like there is a movement to want him to come back, you know, but I don't think the creator has that in mind.
Well, I guess, you know, even with like the Dragon Ball Z cards and stuff like that too, like all these characters come back and through
Mm-hmm.
that, and like we were saying earlier, the games and all that, and all these what if stories. I'm sure they're gonna try to find a way to at least bring him back in a
Well,
flashback.
I did go back and record for him two times outside of doing Z and Kai and the video games. One was the Broly movie from about 5 years ago, because there was a flashback to Nappa when he was young, when Vegeta was a kid.
Yep.
Yeah, he informs him the planet's been destroyed. You see him with hair, you know.
Yep.
I have my own theory. This is not canon. This is just that when the brief time you see Nappa in that movie, he is very calm. He is not at all the, you know, obnoxious professional wrestler guy that you usually see him as. And my theory is that when he came to inform Vegeta that his planet was destroyed, and Vegeta just doesn't care, he doesn't even look up, you know, and Nappa is drawn with a look of shock on his face. I think that's when Nappa decided, I have to be like a drill sergeant all the time, because this dude will kill me at the first sign of weakness, which is, of course, what eventually does happen, right?
Yeah.
So I think Nappa was actually a little smarter and a little more centered than what he seemed. That all that bravado was a survival technique. That was all for, so Vegeta would, you know, keep him around.
You know, you brought up Nappa with hair. I think did you also voice him in the Bardock special?
Hmm. Well, refresh my mind. What is the Bardock special?
The Bardock special was like a Dragon Ball Z. I have the VHS of it still, which is surprising. I still have the VHS, but it's it's like a flashback or like a side story of Goku's father Bardock, and
Hmm.
there's like a scene in there where Vegeta, like a young Vegeta, is training, and then Nappa comes out and like starts like praising him, like, "Oh, Vegeta, you're doing so good," and he has hair in that one too.
I did. Was it published by Funimation?
Yes,
Okay, I probably
yeah.
did. What, do you remember when it came out?
It was a long time ago. I was in first grade still when that came out. So I
But if it was on VHS, maybe not. Maybe that might have been Sabbath. I don't know. I'd have to
oh
look it up.
maybe.
I don't remember that specifically. The other time, though, I do remember going in was a few years ago, and it was for, I believe, Super. And there was a story where Krillin had to like uh, go through this trial where he faced his old fears and see images of old enemies that had killed him before. And he's in some cave, and there's like all these Nappa heads, like all these images of Nappa all around him, and he just laughs, the taunting laugh. And but they did bring me in for that rather than just pull reference. They had me come in, and I just, for about 5 minutes, was you know.
This next question I have here is from Jovan Juchik 211 on Instagram. Um, we've touched upon this before, but he asks, how does it feel being a part of a huge franchise like Dragon Ball? You know, if you can just kind of like elaborate a little bit more, just your thoughts on being a part of this huge franchise.
Oh, I take it as an honor. I mean, again, I said it several times in this podcast, but I just most of the time I was involved with it, I was unaware of how big it was. Probably when I did that con in 2018, that was a Dragon Ball theme con, Kamea Con. Um, that was the first time I saw hardcore fans in person, and I saw dudes that you could tell were dudes that you would expect to be very, very nerdy and timid and weebish, but they were all jacked. You know what I mean? Like they were a lot of confidence, and they were like clearly like we're in the gym all the time, and they said, "Oh yeah, Goku inspired us to train." And I've been thinking, wow, this show like is affecting the course of their lives. The way they conduct themselves. It's not just sitting and watching and playing games. You know what I mean? It's like a code of behavior. It's like a religion, which is how like say Star Trek was for me or Star Wars when I was a kid. And so I look at it that way. Like it's an honor to be even a small part of something that means so much to many people, and personal connections. I've had, when I see fathers and their kids together. There was a young girl at a convention a couple of weeks ago, and she was a cosplayer. Came up to me. She was crying and shaking. She was so nervous to even be talking to me, and she had lost her father. He died recently. This girl was only in her probably barely mid-20s, so that means he must have been pretty young, and she lost her dad young. But she said when she was a little girl, she'd sit in his lap and they would watch Dragon Ball together, and they loved Nappa and they loved the Saiyan saga, and it's so it meant a lot to her because of that's a piece of her dad that she still has with her. And I mean, how can you not be honored to be in touch to be a part of something like that? So it's fantastic. It's great to be connected to something that's beloved the world over.
That is fantastic, man. And again, anime with being how big it is now in its current stages, it's crazy to see how much it's grown. And again, going to these conventions and meeting, whether it's actors or cosplayers or writers or artists, there's so many different avenues for like content or even for entertainment like this. But as we end things here, Phil, again, I just want to say I do appreciate your time doing this, man. Like this was really cool to be able to speak with you and to learn about your experiences as well, and to just kind of talk about your acting career. For fans and followers who do want to follow you, how can they do that?
Sure. I'm on Facebook. I have a voice actor page called Phil Parsons _ voice actor. I have the same name for Instagram. I always announce my appearances, and if there's a new project that I can announce, I put it up there. Also on Twitter, I believe that's Phil Parsons 68, but I don't post much on Twitter. But yeah, Instagram's usually the best place to see new announcements and so forth. And feel free to reach out. I've had people reach out. Hey, if you do want some kind of cameo video, we can talk. If you decide you have a pop and you want me to decorate it up or something, I love hearing from fans. So,
And I'll have all the links in the show notes and stuff like that, so you can follow and contact Phil as well. Again, thank you so much for doing this, man. I hope to meet you at a con one day, and because I absolutely love meeting my guests in person as well. It's very cool to finally just to meet you in person. And again,
sure.
thank you for your time. This was
You bet.
awesome.
All right. Thanks, Ricky.
Yeah. So this is episode 170. Thank you guys so much, and have a great day. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to give a review and rate Spoiler Force Podcast. If you want to get all Spoiler Force updates or even peeks at behind the scenes, you can join the Spoiler Force Discord community. And if you'd like to show support, give tips, recommendations, sponsorships, or any collaborations, you can email me at rickyvang92@gmail.com.